Good artists copy, great artists steal. Steve Jobs famously said this in the year 1996, probably in regard to whatever bullshit he was peddling at the time. But it has since been appropriated to pretty much every facet of artistic expression since, and for good reason. He's right. So what exactly does it mean? Well, sometimes an artist might not have been the one to come up with the technique, but they executed it so well that it naturally started to become attributed to them rather than the originator. And if you want an example, Steve Jobs isn't actually the originator of this quote. The quote is actually attributed to Pablo Picasso, and even then we aren't sure if he was the first to say it. When your legacy and artistic execution paint over the concept, you become synonymous with it, regardless of who made it. Great artists steal, and they don't even have to try. It's no secret that Undertale and more recently Deltarune take heavy inspiration from the Touhou Project, even if their creator Toby Fox wasn't eager to speak about it.
そしてもちろん、ズンさんのTouhou Project,
which he very much is. These influences are palpable from the onset, and not just from the obvious gameplay perspective. I'm talking about everything from the music, to the character dynamics, all the way to its presentational style. There are, of course, plenty of other games that Toby Dog took inspiration from, some arguably more than Touhou. However, as someone heavily invested in the Touhou Project, I want to give my perspective to show what I see beyond the self-evident similarities. What does Undertale steal from Touhou? I could talk about the bullet hell or the music, but why would I do that? That's the obvious shit. Let's talk about narrative themes, vibes, characters, and other stuff people with short attention spans absolutely hate. Just to be clear, my goal isn't to talk about references here, though there are enough that people would get angry if I didn't include them, so I'll talk about those now. The most prominent of these being the Undertale character Asriel compared to the Touhou character Sariel. Never mind that Asriel is just Sariel with the first two letters swapped, but even their designs are similar. Long white sleeves with a colored robe and a symbol in the center. Sariel is titled the Angel of Death. This form of Asriel has the title God of Hyperdeath. Honestly, you could say that the Asriel fight is where the vast majority of Touhou references were shoved in. Most of his attacks use stars and lasers similar to that of Kirisame Marisa. In fact, many of his attacks have direct parallels to hers. Star Blazing could be derived from Marisa's Blazing Star. Shocker Breaker functions like Light Sign Earthlight Ray, both of which even have visual indicators at the bottom of the screen. And of course, Chaos Blaster is the iconic Love Sign Master Spark. You can likely find a ton of similar patterns between the two games, but these are the ones that felt like explicit references. Flowey's green and yellow heart fights also sound musically similar to Hartmann's Youkai Girl and Bad Apple, respectively. There's even a random encounter enemy called Cinder that wears a mob cap commonly worn by a number of Touhou characters, and the method to spare her? Grazing, one of Touhou's core gameplay mechanics. So there's your references, but now I want to go a little deeper into the presentational similarities. Characters in Touhou have a lot more going on than some would believe. The printworks often expand on the characters lucky enough to feature prominently in one or more of these more dialogue-heavy pieces of canon, and over the course of a couple decades of printworks, the number of characters this applies to is more than a couple. Their personalities end up extending far past the few lines of dialogue and omake text that were given in a game. But before all of that, there's just the games. I could tell you why the character and story is simple in the shmups, being that they're meant to be replayed heavily and a ton of dialogue would feel unnecessary and bog it down. But the reason isn't important. A Touhou character is typically presented with nothing more than their design, a musical theme, a couple lines of dialogue to give you a general idea of who they are, and the shape and color of bullets they want to shove up your ass. And guess what? All of these things together form highly appealing characters. Undertale does something similar. Despite it clearly being more dialogue-heavy, the characters remain simple. Rather than taking up moments of dialogue to expand a character, it will often take that opportunity, crumple it up, burn it, and then tell a joke about spaghetti. Considering the game's length, we do learn comparatively more about Papyrus than, say, Wriggle Nightbug, but the game is wholly uninterested in creating depth to the characters, because it knows it's not necessary to make them likable. Papyrus is a two-note character, and he is loved, if not despite that, because of it. Both Touhou and Undertale create likable characters in the same way. But characters aren't the only thing that Undertale skims over. A lot of the information we learn about the underground in Undertale is superficial. Anything beyond that is seldom questioned, and even less so, answered. The few bits of information about the world and how it works are left in cryptic tidbits scattered throughout, or via the short, omniscient intro to the game. In the case of Undertale's world, it is not ignored, it's hidden, and occasionally reminds the player of this fact in between the spaghetti and birds that carry them over disproportionately small gaps. It tells them, there is more to this than meets the eye. And yet, most of it is never spelled out. It's left to theories and thoughts of people with wild imaginations to piece together possible answers. This is exactly what Zune does with a lot of his works. The uncertainty and mystery is something that surrounds both Gensokyo and the underground. As for the more concrete aspects, they are both sealed away from the rest of the world via a barrier, keeping their monstrous inhabitants away. But sometimes, things from the outside world manage to find their way inside. In both of these cases, this results in modern knowledge and culture slowly dripping into their fantasy microcosm. Something they both lean into heavily, though, is the theme of found family. Found family is about chosen bonds. People who may not be related, but trust each other unconditionally. Their bonds could be based on circumstance, hardship, or experience. I think writers often create stories that feature this trope either accidentally, or better put, naturally. They take inspiration from other works, or they simply write what feels correct, and this is the result. Found family appeals primarily to struggling, ostracized individuals or entire demographics, highlighting the idea of finding a group that supports them. For some people, something as simple as a loving family is fantasy enough. Undertale pushes this trope very explicitly. Your whole journey is one about love and building a group of family and friends. At the end, you may choose to stay with your goat mom, the family that you pulled out from the underground. The game does not decide this for you. It is your choice, one that I think does not get enough praise. Touhou, on the other hand, does not build you a family. You are not present in Gensokyo. You are merely peering into it. But when you do, you'll start to notice that everywhere you look is families composed of lifelong friends together in mundanity, sometimes with a sibling or two. And this aspect of it is embraced predominantly in fan works of every medium. It would be reaching to say that Undertale features found family solely because of Touhou, but I want to highlight this important component of what draws many fans towards either series, why fans of one are inclined to be fans of the other. And I guess I could talk about the bullets and music now, but believe it or not, this is just going to lead into more talk about the characters. And this is because the bullets and the music are the characters.
Okay, since you freaks think that all my music sounds like Touhou, I have no choice but to play improvised Touhou music that doesn't actually exist.
Touhou was one of Toby's greatest musical influences growing up, and it shows in both his instrument choice and compositional technique. Many people like to point out the similarities between individual tracks, but I want to talk about something a bit less obvious, namely how a track can be used to build a character. Let's take Cherno for example. Her theme is playful and carefree, something befitting a fairy. On the other end, you have Remelia's theme, which was based on Beethoven's Sonata No. 8, third movement, Pathetique. A classical Western influence to support the vampiric aristocrat identity Remelia presents herself as initially. Other fun examples would include how Koishi's theme sounds like her sister Satori's theme reversed, or the emotional high you get from Byakuren's theme, compounding on the idea that you are witnessing the return of a long-imprisoned savior. Many of the boss fights in Undertale build off its characters in that same way. Any game which minimizes dialogue but wishes to expand a character in some way will use music as an additional voice. But while I would say that Touhou leans heavier into the music exploring the characters, Undertale goes heavier into showing it through the bullets. In Touhou, most of the bullet patterns are given names that reference something related to the characters, tangentially or directly through historical records, pop culture, or something in between. We can glean information from these, sure, but Undertale chooses to go a step further by showing character through the bullets themselves. But what do I mean by character here? The bullets can express the personality, thoughts, or wants of the monsters. This is especially evident with the random encounter monsters who barely have any dialogue. When you fight Metaton, Papyrus, or even Undyne, what you're experiencing isn't just a boss fight, it's a dive into who each of these characters are, showing off their appeals, their interests, not unlike courting during a first date. Sure, Touhou's boss fights might express the referential sources of a character, but Undertale's bosses feel like a natural migration towards character expression. They are each prioritizing something different with their core gameplay. So Undertale draws much more than just chiptune and bullets from Touhou. But how much does it really steal? Well, the nearly decade-old flame wars between the two fan bases would certainly paint a picture, difficulty comparisons, which series has stronger characters, and other dumb shit that doesn't matter being argued by people siding with whatever game they played first. If you ask me, for as much as I love Undertale, and how much I think it's impacted gaming culture, I don't think it steals a single thing. And the proof for that is the fact that there even was a fight to be had. Undertale never overwrote cultural memes of character-focused shmups, or really any of the incredible feats Touhou managed as one of the key primogenitors of internet culture, and that's fine, because Undertale does its own thing. To be fair, most people know this, with the fan wars being old history. I just wanted to show how Undertale doesn't just take the bullets and music. Touhou is blended into the whole experience. And you know, it fucks.